Hey, welcome to this walkthrough play-along series that corresponds with the Hanon-Faber New Virtuoso Pianist book. Today we're going to be tackling actually page 5 of the book, Gesture 1, which is called the Swoop. Now this video is divided into two basic parts, and in part 1 we're going to be walking through the gesture itself, and we're going to be going very slowly and exploring exactly the motions we should be doing with the fingers, the hand, the wrist, and the arm. And then in part two I'm intending as a kind of play-along practice session. So I'll perform the gesture at 6 different tempos, 2 beginner tempos, 2 intermediate, and 2 advanced, and all with the metronome, and I'll give you those metronome markings as well. And it's my hope that you'll continue to revisit the video, the first part to double check yourself in the motions that you're practicing, and in the second part to simply practice along with me as we go through the gestures at different speeds. All right, so let's jump in. The top of this page, page 5, gesture 1, the swoop. The very first line here says this gesture traces the lower swoop of a wrist circle. So let's unpack that a little bit more. So a wrist circle is comprised of 3 movements through space, okay? So 3 movements, 3 dimensions. So we're gonna first talk about 2 of those dimensions. There is a vertical one, like this, and there's a lateral one where with the right hand, the hand moves from left to right, like this, led by the wrist. With the left hand, this would be mirrored. The hand would move from right to left, so away from the thumbs toward the 5th finger, like this. So we have vertical and lateral, like this. Now, when we combine those 2, we get a motion that looks like this. So we go down and to the right and up and to the right. Or if we're hovering over these keys, if you'll do this with me, just look at the first bar of the piece here, the first bar of the gesture. Place our fingers over C, E, F, G, and A. We're not going to play anything yet, but in this position, we're just going to feel this swoop down to the right and up and to the right. Down to the right and up and to the right. And it's okay, definitely good actually, if your thumb leaves the key. Just let it leave the key. And the other fingers are doing a little bit of sliding around, and I'll explain some of that in a minute, okay? But if you feel your fingers sliding, it's just fine. We're going for this really consistent, smooth wrist motion down to the right and up to the right. Now, if I show you with the left hand, we're gonna do the same thing, but it'll be mirrored. So with the left hand, we're gonna go, again, I'm looking at the first bar here, C, A, G, F, E. We're gonna go down and to the left and up and to the left. Down and to the left and up and to the left. Down to the left and up and to the left. So let's go through and actually play the gesture, okay? So with the right hand, back just this first measure. Down and to the right, up and to the right, continuing up. And again, down and to the right, up to the right. It's really hard to narrate exactly what's going on, okay? But I think you can see that. Now if we do it with the left hand, this is gonna be to the left, down and to the left, up to the left, continuing. And then again. Okay, we can even, just with this very beginning, we can put the 2 hands together in contrary motion, which you'll see will come back later in this video. So if we play that together, they're mimicking each other. We can do that twice also. Notice how each one of these times there's a little bit of elbow movement as well. So the elbow is also going in a little bit of a circle while the wrist does. This is just letting the whole body be free. I mentioned that there were 3 dimensions, and we've talked about 2, the vertical and the left-right horizontal or lateral movement, but there's also an out and an in horizontal motion as well, okay? And this is talked about in the last line of the text on the page, and it's in quotes, called a walk-in toward the fallboard. Now, the fallboard is this part of the piano, or if you have a keyboard, it's just the end of the keys, right? Toward where your controls would be. So that is what we're talking about. So what actually happens isn't just a walk-in, like the book says, but it's actually a walk-out and a walk-in. So if I were to just do this in and out, or out and in motion, it would look like this. Okay, and one more time, it would be like this, out and in, something like that. Now, if we combine all 3 of those, we're gonna get a motion that looks like this with the right hand. Coming out, and then coming back in. Let's do it again. walking out, away, and then walking back in. Now, why is that important? It's because whenever we play the piano, the most efficient point of the key to play is the front half of the key. So the piano it's more complex than just a bunch of levers, but basically that's what it is. And the further away from the fulcrum you are, the fulcrum will say is inside the piano, the further away you are, like at the edge of the key, the more control you have over what's happening. So the further we play in, back here, the less distance the key goes down and the less control we have over what is happening inside the piano. The further we move out, the more control we have. So we're always kind of aiming on the white keys in particular. We want to play on the front halves of the white keys if possible. And we want to play on the front maybe inch or half inch of the black keys when possible. Now, of course, there are going to be times when we can't do that. If we have to play a chord on the black keys, like a D flat chord, we're going to be stuck playing in the middle of the white keys and fairly up the key. But as a general rule, whenever possible, we can have the most efficient use of the keyboard, of what we have available to us, if we play toward the outside of the keys or toward the edges of the keys. So that's part of what this gesture is working on, is keeping us playing on that part of the keyboard. Okay? Notice how if I don't do this walking out and walking in, my second and third finger are actually, when they're sitting, resting in their natural place, they're kind of almost in between E flat and F sharp. And we don't want to play there, okay? But there's already a chance that we're going to actually strike one of the other black keys, and we don't want an accident like that to happen. Plus, we're playing, at least a third of the way into the key, and we don't need to be doing that. Now, the way to fix that is not to curl more, because that's being over curled. And over curling produces all kinds of other tension in other places. So the way to fix it is to take our natural resting hand position and move it out, just like that. So that is the walking out and then walking back in. Okay. The last thing that is mentioned here for a tall fifth finger knuckle, that's after this line about walking in toward the fallboard. Okay, this corresponds actually in the music with an accent and a staccato at the end of each measure, like that. And what we really want to feel is just that we are activating, we're feeling an impulse and activation from this knuckle, and it's very strong. Okay? We don't want it to be down here and be slapping the key like that, or we don't want to, hopefully, not just lifting the finger like this. Okay? So if we walk in and the wrist comes up, we have a very strong position for this fifth finger to be, the finger that we usually call a weak finger, right? We cannot develop muscles in the fingers. The fingers don't have muscles. The way we develop stronger playing, more controlled playing, is by orienting the hand in the right way. And this is one way to do that. For our weaker fingers, 4 and 5, we walk in, we have tall knuckles. Now there's another little bit here. Going back to that top line of the page, it says wrist circle and it has an asterisk after it. And we look at the bottom of the page and it says, see the technique glossary on page 64. Well, we can turn back there, the last page of the book, and it says, a wrist circle is a circular tracing of the wrist that aligns the forearm and the large knuckle over the finger as it plays. Let me show you what that means. If I take the second finger in particular on an E as what's in the first measure of the exercise here, if everything is aligned correctly, the forearm, the wrist, the knuckle here, I don't just feel that it's aligned, but I actually feel that the hand is balanced in this position. So each finger can be a balance point. I can shift that balance point to the third finger. I can shift it to the fourth finger. I can shift it to the fifth finger. What ends up happening as I shift this correctly through all the fingers is I make exactly this wrist circle, going from balance point to balance point, or from alignment to alignment. Now, what's the purpose of feeling this alignment? Well, twofold, I think. First of all, it keeps our hand and our mechanism, so mechanism meaning the forearm, the wrist, the hand, the fingers, it keeps the entire mechanism lined up in a way that is healthy and we're not going to have an injury. That's the first part. The second part is that when the mechanism is fully aligned and balanced, we get the utmost control over our playing. That means we can play extremely loudly with relatively little effort if everything is lined up. but it also means we can play extremely softly and still have every note sound. I'm sure many of you have found that soft playing can be much more difficult than loud playing, especially if we're challenging the capability of the instrument itself and saying, how soft can I actually play? Well, if everything is in alignment, we're going to get a much softer tone, the utmost of what we're capable of, than if things are misaligned, meaning stretched out or misoriented or crooked or something like that. Let me show you a little bit of what that looks like with the left hand. So if we combine all three motions and this idea of alignment, and again, and again, so that's the two purposes of feeling this alignment and this balance. One, preventing injury, keeping our hand in the most natural place possible at the keyboard. And two, providing the absolute best control we have over the keyboard, which is going to lead to better phrasing, better musicality, more choices. You can say, well, I'm going to play a certain phrase this particular way. Well, now my hand, my mechanism, can actually execute it the way my brain wants me to, right? So that's a big benefit of staying in alignment here. All right, there's another bit that's on this page, right at the beginning of the first measure of the right hand notation. There's some words and some arrows above that measure, and we have the word drop with a down arrow, and we have the word follow through with this under semicircle, right? And those arrows and those words are telling us a bit about what it feels like in the mechanism to perform this motion. I would encourage you to feel like the drop and the follow through are not two separate motions. I'd also actually consider changing the word drop, or maybe adding to the word drop another reminder. Because when I see the word drop, I sometimes think of this happening. And if we drop, I have broken the structure in my hand, where this is no longer supporting anything. But if I don't drop, if I instead fall with control, I get a cushion in the wrist. Okay? But it doesn't drop, it doesn't go like that. So I'm still performing the same exercise, I'm still performing the same motion, but I'm not allowing the structure to collapse. So maybe consider adding the word fall onto that first note with the down arrow. And then the follow through, the falling is actually the first part of the follow through. So the sooner you can incorporate both motions together into one motion that leads us through this measure, where the falling into the note is just the first part of the gesture, but it's not separated by anything. We don't fall and then make a gesture, right? It's not like that. It's not two. We always want to keep everything in motion. It's one swoop, right? That's why it's called the swoop. One swoop. And I'd really encourage you, as you learn the gesture itself, just play that first measure like I am. There's no need to continue playing the subsequent bars of the gesture exercise until we've really mastered the first bar. And lastly, before we get into part two, progress as we work on these gestures is not going to be in speed. Progress is not speed. In fact, almost never at the piano is progress speed. Progress is the most efficient playing of what we're working on that is possible. And when we achieve that efficiency, speed happens. It just comes naturally. If we push speed first, we're going to be pushing an inefficient mechanism through a lot of things that it may or may not be capable of yet. The sign of progress of learning all of these gestures, gesture one and all of them to come throughout the book, is being able to completely automate or have the gesture be an innate part of us as we work on other things away from these exercises. So we want the gestures to become so incorporated in our playing that we simply apply them without thinking in the future. That's progress, all right? By the time you get to that point, these will most likely be faster because our body just says, I'm capable, we can go faster. But it's not because our mind is saying, let's try to play it faster, because faster means better. Not true. All right, welcome to part 2 of the video, the practicing play along section. I'm going to perform these gestures at 6 tempos, and those tempos will show up on the screen in front of you. You can feel free to write them down. And for the first 3, the 2 beginner tempos and the first intermediate tempo, I'll be playing hands separately. And then for the second intermediate tempo and the 2 advanced tempos, I'll be playing hands together in contrary motion. So just combining the right hand and the left hand exercise in a way where we can feel the hands working together. They're doing the same thing, just mirrored from each other, kind of like we talked about right in the beginning of today's video. One, two. 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 All right, thanks for watching this video and maybe even practicing along with me. I hope you found the video helpful, and I hope you'll revisit it often as you check your progress and check yourself as you work through these motions and gestures. If you didn't already, please like the video, consider subscribing to the channel, ding that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Remember to practice smarter, not harder, and I'll see you next time you visit Pianist Academy.